We're ready.
Action.
Action.
What?
And the participants are coming. So welcome everybody to our first ever Zoom meeting with the best Formula One commentary team ever, I think.
Ever.
We have ever,
Yeah.
That's for sure. We have close to 500 people that have signed up for this meeting, and so they'll be filtering in, but we don't want to wait too long here. So we want to get as much time for David, Leigh, Will, and Steve as possible. So just get started with our program. And the way we're going to do that is to introduce everybody. First of all, my name is Jamie Steer. I'm here in Denver. I'm a vintage car racer and racing enthusiast, but have helped work on the Race Against Kids Cancer for the Morgan Adams Foundation, who's hosting our meeting today for the last 10 years. And so we're excited to have this Zoom webinar in support of that race and the racing community here in Denver. So we're pleased to have David, Leigh, Steve, and Will. Everybody knows these guys and that they're here today. Obviously, that's why you're here, and we just want to thank them for their time today. We really appreciate the fact that you would do this for us and for all the folks that are racing out there that are calling in today. Gosh, everybody's feeling pretty nostalgic about Formula One not being around, but for sure, we miss the team, your guys' team calling the races for us, even when Formula One is coming back. So anyways, just to introduce everybody really briefly, David Hobbs, member of the Motorsports Hall of Fame for his distinguished career in Formula 5000, Trans Am, even F1. He's also a movie star, been in 2 movies that I know of, and is the author of this really cool book. Oh no, it's not coming up. It's my background. Hold on.
Joe, what a relief. I didn't realize we were going to put the books up on the camera.
Yeah. His book, Hobo, Motor Racer, Motor Mouth. Gosh, I wouldn't have said that, but he did. So it's an autobiography that everybody should pick up. It's a beautiful book. So then we have Steve Matchett, who took his love of cars and their mechanics to the highest level of his profession, working for drivers like Nelson Piquet, Johnny Herbert, Gerhard Berger, and of course, Michael Schumacher during his time at Benetton. Steve, too, is an author of a trilogy of books telling the life of an F1 mechanic and all the things that they see and interact with in the course of a season. The first one is called Life in the Fast Lane. It's terrific. I've read it. I don't have it with me, but I think I loaned it out to somebody. But everybody should go out and buy that book right away. So it's really good. Will Buxton, he's still on the job in the Formula One pits. So good to see him out there. It's nice to have that continuity. He has found his way there not from being a driver or a mechanic, but from the journalism angle, I believe. So he actually does admit that he's doing a job for which he has no training or qualifications other than passion or enthusiasm. And those aren't my words, those are his words from his Twitter bio. But that's really clearly enough. His passion and enthusiasm really show through when he's on the grid, jumping in front of other interviewers to get the story from the drivers that we know and love. He also has a book, which is terrific. I just saw that actually, and I'm anxious to get it and read it, called My Greatest Defeat, Stories of Hardship and Hope from Motor Racing's Finest Hero. So it looks like a terrific read, so there it is. Yeah, please buy that too. And then last but not least is we have Leigh Diffey, who is the cat wrangler of this whole group. But probably the best play-by-play caller of the modern Formula One era. He does a terrific job in whatever race he's doing, but certainly in the Formula One races when you guys were doing that before. So he's been a commentator for many, many different types of motorsports, but also things like the Summer and Winter Olympics. So versatile. Which is terrific. I haven't seen a book from Leigh.
I don't have a book yet, Jim.
But given the company here, I'm guessing that there's probably one forthcoming soon, maybe. We'll see. Anyways, finally, the last introduction that we're going to do, who you'll meet in just after a little while in our program here, is Joan Slaughter, who is the executive director of the Morgan Adams Foundation, which was founded after her 6-year-old daughter, Morgan, passed from an incurable brain cancer in 1998. The foundation that she and her husband started exists to fund novel early stage research that has led to numerous advances in the understanding and treatment of pediatric cancer. So terrific work that they're doing here. And like I said before, we're here today because Rocky Mountain Vintage Racing has partnered with the foundation as its charity partner for the Race Against Kids Cancer. This partnership with a terrific foundation has led to some incredible things happening for kids and their families who are fighting pediatric cancer. So thank you guys again for doing this. One bit of housekeeping. Everybody is going to be anxious to ask you guys questions, and we want to take questions. We're going to have about 20 minutes at the end of the hour for the Q&A portion. All you participants out there, you just have to go down to the Q&A button there and post your questions. But when you do that, know that if you pledge a donation along with your question, and we'll show you how to make that donation at the end of the program. If you pledge a donation with your question, you will be moved up higher on the list of questions to ask these guys later. And so, we would like you to think about and consider doing that. We'll do it on the honor system, though. You'll have a chance to see where to do that, and then we'll ask that you make that donation if we ask your question after the program. So with that housekeeping out of the way, I've talked more than enough, and we'll turn it over to the guys you're all here to listen to. All right, go on, guys. Thanks.
Jamie, thanks so much, and to Joan as well. And I think it's really important to establish right from the outset that the four of us really missed being with you guys and speaking about Formula One to the US audience. And when this opportunity came along, which we don't get many opportunities anymore for the four of us to be together and to talk, we did it right towards the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we got together and did one of these Zoom four-ways for NBC Sports. But we miss it as much as you guys do. And for this very cause, both David and Steve have been out to Colorado and worked with Joan and Jamie and everybody supporting the Morgan Adams Foundation and Rocky Mountain Vintage Motorsports and the Race Against Kids Cancer. So for Will and myself, we haven't done that yet, but it was not a hard sell. We are all volunteering our time because certainly with the state that the world is in right now, we could all do with doing something nice for each other and for a very worthy cause. And that's why we've all got together here today, and we're really excited to do so. We know that time is of the essence, so we're already 8 minutes past the hour. We want to whip through a lot of topics. Steve, I'm going to start with you first, because wherever I travel in the world and people know us and people know you, they always say to me, is Matchett really as big a Ferrari fan as he seems on television? And let's start with Ferrari, and let's start with just mind-blowing news that Sebastian Vettel will not be racing for Scuderia Ferrari next year. How did you take that news?
Well, I think it was always coming, quite frankly, and the signs were there, and I think we may have chatted about it before, and we certainly chatted about it on Twitter, which is my main, or actually sole media platform that I use. The day that Charles Leclerc stood on the podium at Monza, I remember saying on Twitter that day, it's over for Vettel. It's over, because you could see in Vettel's eyes, there was this it was like a stunned look in his eyes. And it was really nothing to celebrate if you're a Vettel fan, of course, but you could see Vettel had joined Ferrari because he wanted to try and emulate all the things that Michael Schumacher, his friend and mentor, had managed to achieve during Michael's time at the team. And it just hasn't worked out for him. And try as much as he could to make the cars that Ferrari are giving him work better and work well and get the car to the end of the race. There's just something about Vettel, and we've all seen it, there's just these little sort of outbursts of temper that come at absolutely the wrong time, which have taken him out of races time and time again. And then when you saw Charles Leclerc jump into the car and was immediately fast, and not only that, immediately bonded with the team, I think we all began to think, boy, oh boy, the end is coming. And one of the things that I'll take away from my time working in the pit lane, which has always stood with me, and I've mentioned this on our broadcast time and time again, if you're a driver in a Formula One team, never be put off by this idea of being the number one or number two driver. The way you become the number one driver is everything that we've just seen happen with Charles at Ferrari. You go out there, you try and out-qualify your teammate every single opportunity. You try and outscore him. You bring the car home when your teammate doesn't bring the car home. And all of a sudden, that attention from one side of the garage will automatically switch to the opposite side of the garage. And now, you've got to say now, Leigh, with, I mean, this season's pretty much a write-up, as we know, but with the creation of next year's car, and this is the key from the team's perspective and why the drivers get so bent out of shape about it, is all the little furboils that they've found in one car, they will now correct towards their fastest, most consistent driver. And that was really the nail in the coffin, I think, for Vettel, because he realized that next year's car would be catered towards Charles Leclerc, not towards Sebastian Vettel. He was caught between a rock and a hard place and had nowhere to go.
Well, for you, week in, week out, you're face-to-face with these guys in the bullpen in the F1 paddock. Are you chomping at the bit to put the microphone in front of Sebastian Vettel's mouth, and what will you ask him? And what did you observe last year? Was it a sea change within Ferrari, or did it happen a little bit at a time, each time that particularly Sebastian made those unforced errors? What are your thoughts on it all?
I think it changed massively as early as Bahrain last year, to be totally honest with you, where we saw Charles could have won the race, and Lewis went up to him afterwards, and it was only an engine failure that stopped him from winning that race. And Lewis, he shook his helmet and was like, I know that you're going to win races soon. But I agree with Steve. It was Monza. It was all about Monza. The day that Seb kept spinning, had all those unnecessary contacts, finished a lap down, and he's standing there under the podium, and he's won at Monza before, but never in red, never for Ferrari. And he stood underneath that podium, and Charles is there being anointed as the new king of the Tifosi. That was it. It was over. And the next race in Singapore, Ferrari manipulated the result to give it to Sebastian, and he unfurled that flag at the top. It said, "Essere Ferrari, we are Ferrari." And it was almost like a plea more than a message. It was like, please, I want to still be a part of you. I want to still be part of this team. And then he tried to do his normal Sebastian thing the next time out in Russia. He ignored team orders. No, I'm the number one. I'm the boss. I run this show. And they still switched the positions. And he knew. He completely knew at that point. It was over. There was no coming back to it. And Charles hasn't done it by being overly political. He's just, as Steve said, gone about his job. He's done it exactly the right way. He's brought the fans with him. He's brought the team with him. And now he's got a new teammate in Carlos Sainz, who I think will be great for Ferrari. I can't wait to see how that dynamic builds up over 2021. The most interesting thing for me, you say, what will I ask Seb when I see him, is where are you going for 2021? Are you going to retire? Could we see you and Lewis together at Mercedes, which would just be just for 1 year? And I know it's a pipe dream, but wouldn't it be wonderful? Lewis and Seb, the two drivers that have defined the last decade, for 1 year, gloves off, year-old car. It's a throwaway season. It would be box office. I'd love it.
If I was Sebastian Vettel, I would not want to do that, because Sebastian Vettel, when you look back at his career, has had a bit of a history of making mistakes. For instance, the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix in the rain, when we were all there, Steve, we were up there. And, on the last laps, Button, who had come from dead last, on the last lap, Seb let it go and Button won the race.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing that must have obviously Monza was a moment to be remembered forever. But the moment I think that Sebastian Vettel remembers the German Grand Prix, when he's leading and it starts to rain, and he stuffs it in the fence. He just must have felt, God almighty, look, talk about kick the car, kick the cat, kick the wife, kick everybody. Just must have been so different for him. And the one thing about old Luis, our boy Luis, he doesn't make many mistakes. If he's going to spin, he always does it on Friday, maybe on the third practice on Saturday morning, but once he gets to that qualifying in the race, he doesn't make many mistakes. And if they do join forces, which, as you say, would be absolutely fantastic, I don't see Vettel really getting as close to Hamilton as Bottas does.
Looking resplendent in pink, by the way, Hobbo.
Yeah, thank you, Hobbo.
So Will started to go down this road by mentioning Carlos Sainz.
He looks like him, doesn't he, with that hair?
Say it again.
Will looks like Carlos Sainz with that mop hair.
Thanks. I've been working on it all lockdown. It's been
I've never seen you with hair that long.
I know, right? No one has.
So without ignoring Carlos Sainz becoming Leclerc's new teammate at Ferrari, on the back end of that is Ricciardo, after the biggest contract of his career, leaving Red Bull and going to Renault for all the dough. How do you see that panning out at McLaren, Steve? What do you reckon?
Well, I looking at McLaren and looking at the sport in general, McLaren find themselves, I just said, between a rock and a hard place. When we talk about the cost cap coming into effect at McLaren, the budget restrictions at McLaren, and we've already heard that McLaren are thinking of laying off, 1,200 people, did I hear, from the organisation? Obviously, that's not all F1 personnel, but I think McLaren and many other teams, they're going to find themselves of how much money can we afford to spend on drivers? And the drivers going to these teams now are going to be thinking, well, with the cost restrictions coming in, how will that affect the design and development of the new cars? Can we, for example, expect that the quality from any team will be the same if they keep making these dramatic budget cuts to the team? So I think both for the team and for the drivers, they're in unknown territory. Not just for McLaren. McLaren is such a massive organisation in racing. We know they've been around for so long, and they've got great resources. But if they all manage to somehow, and frankly, our Lord knows how they're going to make this cost cap actually work. But if they do pull it off, it'll be an entirely different operation. It has to be. You can no longer, for example, if you're McLaren or Mercedes or you're Red Bull or one of the big teams, you can't suddenly diverge off on a research and development idea. And so I'm slightly moving away from McLaren. I'm thinking about Mercedes Frick suspension that they spent all that money on and went nowhere, and then this movable front suspension that they were testing in the off season. You're no longer going to be able to do that. So I think for any young driver now, you've got to be looking at real team stability. And it's arguably, I don't know how this will work out. It's arguably not the case that the big teams are going to be the teams that you want to work with. Because if the smaller teams are used to working on a very tight, constrained budget, and they have a limited number of engineers that are very good in every department, the midfield teams, might well benefit from that.
Like Racing Point.
Yeah, totally. Steve on this. It's about how you make the money work for you under the new regulations, and we got to stop thinking about McLaren as one of the big teams that they were in the 80s. You look at Williams, you look at McLaren in the 80s, and what they used as their budget for an entire season is a budget for a week now in Formula One terms. The grandees of old are not the grandees of today. And I think Daniel Ricciardo moving to McLaren right now is the right driver to the right team at the right time. They're getting Mercedes engines for 2021. The best power unit in the sport, utilizing the knowledge that they have. Andreas Seidel, the team principal, is an absolute genius, has created so much success wherever he's gone. I'm really excited about Daniel going to McLaren. I'm excited for McLaren. I think Lando is a really great young driver, and both of them have this really happy-go-lucky personality out of the car. And then they get in the car and they pull the helmet on, and it's all serious. It's game face, and they are two really serious contenders. I just think that whole little unit, and learning as they have over the last couple of years to make every penny count, as you say, like the Racing Points of this world, I think McLaren are going to be a serious prospect over the next couple of years.
I think making all these announcements early for these driver changes early is going to lead to some very uncomfortable scenes when the racing does start. When you're making adjustments and modifications of the car, you're not really going to want the driver to know about it because, they already know that next year they're going to be somewhere else. So I think it's going to make some pretty uncomfortable debriefs in the old motorhome. I say motorhome in the mansion.
Yeah.
Well, we don't even know if we're going to have motorhomes this year. It's all a little bit up in the air.
What's the latest that you're hearing about when you think the season will reignite?
It changes all the time, but it sounds at the moment like it's going to be in July. And it seems like we'll have 10 European races in 8 weeks. So 3 back-to-back, then a fortnight off, then another 3, then a fortnight off. And it'll sort of roll like that and go through what was the August break. What happens after that in the sort of international flyaway races, whether we end up in the US, whether we go to Japan and China and all those places, no one really knows for sure at the moment. One thing I know definitely won't be happening is any street races, because the amount of time it takes to create a street race, all of that effort that has to go into it, it's just not feasible. So it will be at permanent race circuits, and whether we have, whether we go to COTA and have 2, who knows at the moment. But it's
I tell you that just in the days that have passed, that the decision was made by NBC Sports to have myself and Townsend Bell and Paul Tracy and 2 of our pit reporters on site in Texas. And, for as much as the 4 of us have traveled throughout our respective careers, we've all been at home like everybody else around the world. And now just the other day to get an email, a travel email, that I'd be getting on a plane again, and we're actually going to a race meeting and that it's actually firing up again. It feels really strange because we're all 4 of us are the same. You get in that routine of, going. And when someone says stop, or a pandemic forces you to stop. Right now, it feels kind of strange that this time next week, I'll be sitting at Texas Motor Speedway, getting ready to call an IndyCar race. But hey, Hobbs, I want to get your thoughts on something in particular. With Renault, I'm at as you can kind of see in the background, I'm on the edge of a golf course. I'm at my mate Calvin Fisher's house in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And we were talking about this before at the beach. How do you reckon old Cyril Abiteboul feels about, writing the big check? He has to face the Renault board, who they've spoken very publicly about their financial woes and what their strategies are to try and keep afloat. How do you think Cyril Abiteboul feels about signing a massive contract for Daniel Ricciardo? And then already, as Steve mentioned, you mentioned, the announcement has been made very early that he's off after 1.5 seasons.
Are you asking me?
You, Hobbo, yeah.
It's me.
Yes, you know.
Well,
Dave,
I mean,
I
I was talking to you yesterday that Renault are in a whole heap of trouble. I mean, they're laying off like 15,000 people. A lot of those people are going to be in France. And as you know, the French government don't like people being laid off, especially from Renault, of which the government own 15%. I've seen the email that you sent me, the link, where, Renault say, no, we are still in Formula One. We're going to stay in Formula One. But Cyril must be just thinking, crikey, what are the bosses going to say about me coughing up $25 million for Daniel, and he F's off after the first year. That's what I mean about the situation.
That's a technical term, folks, by the way.
Very technical term. It's going to be very, well, if the mayor can use it, I can use it, I suppose. But it's a tough decision for those guys. And of course, how much will his cost cap when it comes in? Is that going to be a help to someone like Renault or not? I mean, they haven't been able to spend that much money anyway. So as Steve's sort of saying, maybe the smaller teams who used to having cost cuts forced on them, maybe they will come out better than this. But of course, in their case, because a lot of it depends on the engine, and that's always a big budget item to improve the engine to get it up to the standard of, say, the Mercedes.
I must say, David, we were chatting about this earlier on. Leigh and I were chatting. You weren't involved in that conversation. It was a private conversation. And we're talking about Renault. And right, to pick up on your point, I mean, I was listening to the BBC radio yesterday, and the guys there were saying that Renault are looking to cut 2 billion with a B euros from their budget. And they'd already closed a factory in Paris, and that was closed down, and the guys are trying to be relocated to another factory. But with it being a Carl Sagan B, not an M, 2 billion euros, how does that sit with
Absolutely
France in general, like France, or particularly Renault? But how does France? Are they going to look over at the F1 project and say, oh, sure, that's perfectly acceptable? Why would you not continue with the Formula One project when you've just shut one of your factories and you need to save 2 billion euros? I read this press release like everybody else did yesterday, and I was thinking, well, I mean, you may have seen it on Twitter. I put out there one of Hemingway's quotes. The best way to know if you can trust someone is to trust them. But I wonder, how this is going to pan out in the next few weeks, because are we going to expect another press release from the powers that be at Renault saying, well, actually, we've thought about this and this makes no sense whatsoever? How can we possibly justify it?
I mean, they're the only people that are going to be using the Renault engines are Renault themselves. So they'll be doing their sole development. It's not like they've got 4 or 5 teams to be developing their engines for them. Nobody wants their power unit. Who's driving for them? They've got one driver in Esteban Ocon, who's had a season and a bit in Formula One. Who's the other driver? What are they going to do? Do they go for Alonso again? And how much is that going to cost them? There are a lot of questions around Renault at the moment. As Leigh has said, if you're Cyril Abiteboul right now, it's squeaky bum time, because it all falls on your shoulders.
Squeaky bum time.
Yeah.
Squeaky bum time.
And I tell you what, Leigh, as we all say, in Formula One, in motor racing in general, but certainly in Formula One, when you buy a Formula One team, what are you actually buying? I'm always mystified by this. It's almost like buying mist, isn't it? Like, if let's say that Renault comes up for sale, but Renault, by that extension, have stopped producing their engines. So the potential buyers of Renault, if it was to be up for sale, aren't buying the power unit. They might buy about 10 or 15 show cars, which are completely unable to be used to the new regulations. So they're effectively worthless. You've got driver contracts. Well, they really are worth, next to nothing, as we all know. It's very difficult to know when you buy an F1 team what you've got.
You're buying the people, Steve. You're buying all those good folks at Enstone. That's what you're buying.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, Will, if they're prepared to stay there. But if the team comes up for sale, how many of those very gifted mechanics engineers, composite works and electronics engineers have gone to somewhere else with more stability? Like I say, it really is difficult to know what you're buying.
That will never move. That will never move.
Well, the factory.
Huh?
The factory.
No, your friend.
Enstone will always be there. It'll always be on the map.
Hey, I heard the other day that the Renault sign on the Enstone factory, Will, if you were to pull that sign off on the front gateway, it's still got the Benetton flag underneath it.
Probably. I'll go. I'm only 5 minutes down the road. I'll go and give it a look.
Go and have a look.
Tomorrow morning. I'll go and give it a look.
Hey, fellas, what are your thoughts on next week, IndyCar, Texas Motor Speedway, with the rest of the motorsport world sitting idle at the moment? How big an opportunity is that for IndyCar?
Well, can I just say, before we get on to what an opportunity is for IndyCar, what a terrifying place to go back to if you are rusty and haven't driven in however long it is, going straight out under the lights in Texas. That's a chat. That's like going up at Indy as your first race out of the season. That's a huge challenge for the drivers.
Well, I think we saw a few weeks ago too, with NASCAR firing up and the monstrous rating they got from that first race. It's kind of normalized a little bit, but it's been fun watching NASCAR midweek, nighttime races. And I think this break has underscored how much we crave live sport. It doesn't have to be motorsport, but I think could be a big weekend for IndyCar next weekend, Hobbo.
I think it'll be a huge weekend for IndyCar. I mean, as you say, you're all going to be there on site. It is obviously, as Will said, a terrifying track, but because it's incredibly exciting racing there, very, very high speed. No, I think it'll be an amazing opportunity for both IndyCar and NBC. And of course, Roger Penske, you got to just look at him. He just bought the Speedway, he bought the series, he bought everything, and boom, not a race in sight. But Roger, being a very, very steady hand at the tiller, has managed to, get everything organized, moved it all down, and got everybody to agree, which is absolutely fantastic. Got all the promoters to agree, and they've shuffled all the races around. And I think he sees this as a huge opportunity by putting it on the big network, NBC, as opposed to NBCSN as well. I think you'll see a big rating next Saturday night. I really do. I don't see how you can't. And that will obviously roll forward for the rest of the season. So I think it's a great opportunity for both IndyCar and NBC, and for Roger Penske, who's going to try and really make this whole thing work. And I think he will. I think he'll shake things up a lot. Steve, what have you been watching in the absence of live sport?
I have been binge watching Star Trek Enterprise. Yeah, this is the show. This is the show that came out about 15 years ago. It's kind of the prequel to Star Trek, the original series. So it's like the ship was NX-01. Being really nerdy now with Star Trek, it was ship NX-01, and it's the whole series is kind of just getting, you know, the Starfleet Academy up and running, and interaction with the Vulcans and that sort of thing. But I have to say, I watched a couple of episodes of Star Trek Enterprise on the TV, and that's what made me buy the disc set. I thought, actually, these stories are actually pretty cool. And I think if the guys had given the Star Trek writers more time to get the story plots right, I think that series would still be running now, because it was terrific. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. But watching the DVD extras and the commentary, etc., that comes with all this, I know we're deviating off F1, but I find this fascinating. They were telling me the guys were making an episode every 7 days, from writing to principal photography to editing it to putting it out on air. There was a show every week. I mean, talk about, up against it every single week. So, yeah, anyway, that's what I've been watching. I've been watching Star Trek Enterprise and been loving it. It's been great.
Hobbo's been watching the Korean Baseball League.
Have you actually?
Well done, Hobbo.
We've been watching Josh, what's his name, on his hunts around the world for various treasures, and lost World War II gold and alligators down tunnels and stuff like that. So, yeah, we've been transfixed by him.
What about you, long hair?
I've been watching a bit of the old esports, and I know it's been a bit controversial, but you were talking about IndyCar coming back and what a huge opportunity it is for IndyCar. And I got to say, the strangest thing I think I'm going to find with watching IndyCar for real is no McLaughlin in it, because he just turned up and was phenomenal from the outset. And, everyone was so excited about him, the crossover from Aussie Supercars to IndyCar, getting those couple of chances, and then it looked like it wasn't going to happen, and then it happened in the virtual world, and he turned up and was just an absolute, even more than, for me, obviously I was interested in Lando Norris, given the IndyCars a couple of goes, but McLaughlin for me was just so super impressive. I loved watching him, and I just think it's going to be really weird not seeing him in the IndyCar field, because he's just been mega.
He has. I think we could talk probably for another half an hour about virtual world racing, but real world consequences for a handful of drivers.
Oh boy! Oh, there's an unwritten handbook that needs to be written, isn't there?
Which is pretty crazy. We're gonna pause for a moment, and I'm going to hand it back to Jamie, because Jamie's got some important words to talk to us all about, the whole reason why we're all together, and that's going to save a good chunk of time, because I can see at the bottom of my screen that there are quite a few requests in the Q&A queue. So, Jamie, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Gosh, you guys, it's so fun to hear you just riff on what's happening in Formula One and in the racing world, and we really appreciate that you do that. Yeah, we miss that happening every race weekend. So thanks again for doing this. So we've had some technical difficulties. We didn't get quite as many people into the thing as we had hoped to, but we still have almost a couple hundred. So thanks for everybody for being patient in trying to get back in. That was a Zoom issue that we didn't know about until we went live here today. So we apologize for that. But in any case, we're still having a great day, and it's fun to hear you guys talk. All I wanted to do was to just take a couple minutes and say that our Rocky Mountain Vintage Racing's Race Against Kids Cancer is an annual event that over the course of the last 9 years, this will be our 10th season doing this, we've raised something like $1.2 million that has gone directly to support early stage kind of entrepreneurial research into pediatric cancer. And it's made a huge difference in the lives of kids, not just in the Denver area, but because this information goes out to people around the world, the work that the Morgan Adams Foundation does is making a difference in lives everywhere. And so we just want to let you guys know about our website. It's called the raceagainstkidscancer.org, raceagainstkidscancer.org, all one word. And you can go there and see what the race is all about, see what the drivers are doing that are in the race, and if you care to and would like to make a donation, we would very much appreciate it. These guys, the four fellows that are on the panel here who have taken their time to do this today, have done this sort of program live and in person in the past, and it's been a really terrific, fun evening for people who get to go to those. And people will pay up to $225, $250 to do the program with the little after program behind the scenes meet and greet with the fellows. But a lot of people will pay $75 to just go to one of these shows. And you all are getting this for free. And so I would like to ask you to consider making a $75 donation. It's tax deductible, so that makes it even cheaper. It's almost free if you do it, $75, for the chance to attend this free Zoom webinar. It would go to support kids' cancer research, and we would just really appreciate it if you would consider doing that. So with that, we are going to jump into a few questions, and then we're going to ask the guys to go on with their talk a little bit more. But I've got a few questions to ask, and so the first one is, let me see here. It came with a $500 donation, which is amazing. We really appreciate that. And the question is it true that at any given race, from about lap 15 to lap 35, David Hobbs takes a nap? That's the question. Of course, it came from Peter Taylor in Denver, Colorado. So he wants to know what your nap is like between lap 15 and 35.
Peter, I'm shocked at you being so presumptuous as to assume that I have a nap. I had a nap when I was talking to you lot. Doesn't mean to say I have a nap when I'm on the telly. So no, I didn't give you that. Although it has been known for me to nap during a broadcast. That is true.
Peter, it happened once at Le Mans. Well, it's happened hundreds of times. Yeah. It happened once at Le Mans when we were on air, back in the old Speed Channel days, and I was sitting in the play-by-play. David was sitting in the middle, and Dorsey Schrader was sitting on the end. And it was in the middle of the night. You know, it's pretty tough when they cut off a lot of the cameras. And we were talking, we were all going da-da-da. And you don't always look at each other when you commentate. And I asked David a question, and I looked over, and David was like a parrot. His chin was on his chest, and he was not fast asleep. So Dorsey picked up and answered the question. So we cut this, just a two-man commentary. We're going. Next minute, Hoppo pops up. Well, of course, that Arnage, that's a tricky right-hander.
That's awesome.
He would do that. And Leigh, you remember, you know, when we were calling the races for NBC, and how we would arrange our desk at NBC would be, I would be sitting on the far left, David in the middle, and Diff over on the right-hand side, so we could both keep an eye on David. And he had this incredible ability to nod off, just as Leigh was describing. And, you know, you thought, well, you know, we'll leave him to it. So Leigh and I had carry on sort of chatting away to each other. And then at the absolute perfect critical moment in the race, David would pop his eyes up again, just like you described, and say, well, and that is exactly what we're expecting to happen there with Alonso. He'd been asleep for the 5 laps prior to that.
That's so great that you guys cover for each other like that. That's a good team right there.
They lie a lot too.
Okay, we have another question here that says, we hear that drivers say they'd love to race at certain tracks. What is a track you have not visited or commentated from, but would love to one day? And let me preface that by saying the only right answer to that is High Plains Raceway for the Race Against Kids Cancer in August. And so if you guys would want to come, we would be more than happy to let you commentate. But aside from that one, what would you say?
Yeah, Will.
Well, apart from the obvious answer that's already been given, look, I was really lucky in my time with NBC that I got to do qualifying at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the 500. And if there's one place I want to go, one race I want to call, one race, even just to be at as a fan that I've never been able to do for all the years of working in F1 because Monaco always is a conflict, it's the Indy 500. It just seems like the most magical race on earth, and I'd love to be there for it.
Steve?
Yes, I had never been in Indianapolis for the 500, and yes, it would be a tremendous race to see that. But I have been to the track, as we all have. So, I mean, technically, I can't say it'll be the Indy 500 track or Indianapolis because I've been there. But I tell you a track that I've never been to, which seems extraordinary thinking about it. I've never been inside the gates of Brands Hatch in good old Blighty. Never been there. Never went there for a test. And of course, in my time in the pit lane, never went there for a race. And, you know, as soon as I quit Benetton, because I thought it'd be a cool idea to be a writer in France, I moved to France. So, you know, it kind of passed me by. And then from France, I've moved over here to Charlotte. So Brands Hatch is a track that I've never been to. And should ever Formula One return to Brands, you know, count me in. I'd love to go there.
Hobbs?
Well, I mean, I can't think of a track that I haven't been to. So I've either driven at it or commentated at it. Funny enough, we were just watching a travel program today, and they were talking about Albi. And I never ever raced at Albi, where they used to have a Formula 2 race there for years. I've never been to Albi. I'd like to have driven there. Interesting street track. But other than that, I mean, I've been to just about every Formula One location. I've never been to Russia, but I've commentated on it, of course, all via the TV. So there's not many left that I haven't been to, except, of course, the raceway.
High Plains Raceway.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. How about you, Leigh?
I don't know why, but do you remember the old Turkish Grand Prix track outside?
I was about to say that with Hobbo.
I never got to go there. I went to Istanbul once to the Pirelli factory and drove past the track, but we never called in. And I always, actually, I saw something on Twitter just yesterday. It was the 10th anniversary of Vettel taking Webber out. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
For some reason, I just love that track, that never-ending turn 8, and I just thought it was an awesome track. So,
Yeah, it was.
It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Hey, it was that turn 8 corner you're talking about. It was the one that had like 4 apices.
4 apexes.
Yeah.
Well,
as David likes to say, 4 apices.
they tried to replicate it at COTA with the right hand, 16, 17, 18. They didn't quite get it the same. But Istanbul, and do you remember how great Massa used to be at Istanbul? You couldn't beat Massa at Istanbul. He was phenomenal there. What a track.
Yeah.
Question.
So we have another question. We have another question that should be really quick for $75 from Chris in Denver.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep. David, is Clag spelled with a C or a K?
Great question. Great question.
I always spell it with a C. But of course, for instance, if you're a German, you would probably spell it with a K. But I spell it with a C, yes. Clag. It's only got one G.
Okay, good to know.
It's like Cologne and Cologne. It depends where you come from, whether it's a C or a K, I
Yeah.
See that picture, that Ferrari behind you is a bit of clag, just caught in the front wing on that car.
You hate to see that, right? Okay, this could get really involved, and let's not let it. But for a $50 donation, Lee asked, how are engine development costs handled in the cost cap compared to Honda, who doesn't have a team, to Mercedes, who has a team, and customers to Renault?
I have an answer. I know the answer to this.
Go on.
All engine manufacturers are limited, and it's outside the budget cap, but they are limited to a $15 million budget per year on engine developments. So whether you are Honda, Renault, Mercedes, what's the other one? Ferrari, that's it. You are limited. $15 million a year, engine development. That is a cost that the engine manufacturer takes on by themselves, and it's external to the budget cap, which is per team, not per engine.
See, here's my problem. Here's the conundrum, and help me with this, because this has been irking me for a while now. Let's say that I want to develop an engine, and we'll call it the Hobbs V12. And I'm very close to running out of development costs, well, for obvious reasons, because Hobbs like to blow them up very, very fast. But let's say I'm running very close to running out of development costs, and I go to piston manufacturer X, who usually would charge $10,000 a piston, and I say, if I put your decal on my car, will you sell me 100 pistons for 10 cents each? And they say, what a tremendous idea. Yes, we'd love to have your decal on the car. We will sell you them for 10 cents each. Now, extrapolate that throughout the whole car, and where's the budget control? Over to you, Will.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, you could extrapolate it even further and say that if marketing costs aren't included in the budget cap, then surely a successful car helps with the team's marketing. Therefore, all R&D could be classified as a marketing expense. But let's not get into that.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, and I think
more donations.
Doesn't it just highlight? I think it's not as easy as some folks would like to imagine when we talk about capping costs in motor racing, because it's been like that for years. A lot of manufacturers, teams over the last 25, 30 years have always said it's completely unworkable, because how do you control it if you want to get around it? But I'm interested to see what the FIA do. I know, David, you're always very critical of the FIA. So how do you think they're going to manage it?
I don't think they're going to manage it at all.
Go, Jamie. Take over, Jamie.
Yeah. Short and sweet. I like that. Okay, so for a $100 donation, Ryan asks, do you think Ferrari will really join IndyCar?
Ooh, great question. For $100, I'd say yes. Thank you for the donation, by the way. Look, we brought it up earlier. McLaren are having to lay off an awful lot of staff. They're laying off 70 from their F1 team, a whole lot more from the entire organization. Ferrari have said they want to go into either endurance racing and or IndyCar as well, in order for them to not have to lay off staff. So if Ferrari keeping its staff on board means that they come and enter IndyCar, I mean, that would just be fantastic, wouldn't it? It would be wonderful.
And IndyCar's been working so hard for so long to get a third OEM. And given Roger Penske's footprint on the automotive world globally, if there was ever a time for Ferrari to enter IndyCar as an engine supplier, I think it now could not be better.
100%. 100%.
Was that your phone ringing, David?
It tried to, but I had it all this.
You were quick to turn it down. Okay, let's see. So for a $100 donation, Joe, who says, hello, gentlemen. What do you think of the recent rumors regarding Toto Wolff, Lawrence Stroll, and Mercedes?
Bullshit.
Nice.
Will, can you flesh that out just a little bit more?
I believe that was the crux of the Mercedes statement that came out earlier today. Got
a crutch.
Some people just love banging that same old drum, don't they? Because a broken clock's got to be right twice a day. Mercedes has said countless times they're not pulling out. Toto is with them for the future. Yes, he has invested in Aston Martin shares. He's a good mate of Toto Wolff, but is he going to leave all that Mercedes have created, all that Mercedes have done, to go and join Aston Martin, or is Lawrence Stroll going to buy the Mercedes? None of it makes any sense. If you actually start to piece it together, it's one of the strangest theories I've ever heard in 20 odd years of doing this. It doesn't add up.
Will, not to disagree with you, but I know you've got your ear very close to the pit lane, and I'm somewhat disconnected from it here over in Charlotte. But is there any sense, any feeling, I should say, to get the right definition of sense, is there any feeling that Mercedes are thinking, how much longer do we need to keep doing this before all we can do is start to lose? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, when do they get to the point of thinking, well, we're already in Formula E. We made a massive presence in Formula One with incredible costs. You know, are we getting close to the point where we need to pull the plug? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking you for your advice. What do you think about it?
I mean, look, it's the same for every manufacturer in every area of motorsport that they can test, isn't it? You know, at what point does the hunger for victory and the notion of win on Sunday, sell on Monday, at what point does that disappear? Does that even still exist? And that's an existential question about motor racing and whether it has road relevance into the future. But I think the competitive desire is still there, massively. You know, you ask Ferrari, why are you still doing Formula One 70 years after you started? You know, you're Ferrari. You're never going to be more famous than Ferrari, so why do you still do it? What's the need? What's the point? Because they're there to win. Because they're racers.
Well, Ferrari would probably say that's our marketing budget, because you never see Ferrari advertise anywhere else. You know, I would suggest that's why Ferrari say we're happy to spend money on F1 because we don't spend it anywhere else. But and I agree with you 100% what you said about the urge and the desire to win from the team, from the engineers. But I wonder if any of those guys, you know, over in mainland Europe are thinking, you know, there's some point we're going to have to get out of this. But I'm asking the question, and that's all.
Sure. But from the perspective of the Lawrence Stroll, Toto Wolff, Mercedes board, that whole odd theory that's been bandied around for ages, it just doesn't stack up for me, and it never has. But that's just my take.
So to move along here and to hoover up as much donation money as possible, let's combine two questions, each for $100. I don't know how to do this. So Rich wants to know what you think about the Williams announcement, and Larry would like to know what do you think about the reintroduction of ground effects and how it'll affect drivers, more specifically those who have driven with them before and those who have not. So
How about you take the Williams one? What do you think about the Williams scenario?
Well, it sounds pretty dire. I mean, they've been hurting for the last couple of years, and to be dead last 2 years in a row, when, as Steve always points out, they've actually won more championships than anybody else except Ferrari. It's hard to believe now that it's so long since they've won a championship. I mean, I guess it's going to be for sale. They sold their high-end, high-tech business off, so that's gone. And they made a $16 million loss this year as opposed to a $16 million profit. So, yeah, I'd say that it probably is up for sale. Just a horrible story of mismanagement and kind of just, I don't know, wrong people in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, they've had some great engineers there who've come and gone, and nothing changed, and nothing improved. And, you know, we all expected so much from them, but they just seem to continue this downward spiral. So I think it's very, very hard for them to keep going, and probably somebody will buy them, but now is not a great time to be buying anything.
I think we could talk for half an hour about the Paddy Lowe re-entry and
Absolutely.
But anyway, that's a different topic. Steve, you can talk very specifically to ground effects. What are your thoughts?
Well, it'll certainly generate more downforce. I mean, that was the reason that ground effects were taken away, because it generated such a huge amount of downforce. And I think the technical arm of the sport are trying to work towards a way to create downforce without the turbulence affecting the front wing from the leading car affecting the trailing car. You know, you talk to the genius of the sport, of whether it's Rory Byrne or Adrian Newey in terms of aerodynamics, and those guys will tell you that you need, realistically, in a perfect world, you need 2 seconds between the cars to prevent turbulence from one car affecting the other. Well, very, very rarely do you get 2 seconds between two Formula One cars. I'm not sure that it's the answer in terms of stability on the front of the car, but I'm guessing that the sport, the FIA, and Ross Brawn, now heading up the technical department with Liberty, have done extensive tests and believe that it will make a difference. But I'll be very brief here. Of all the aero changes we've made in Formula One over the last 30 years, 35 years, none of them have ever made any difference. You put bigger wings on the rear and bigger wings on the front, and then there's a rule change and you put smaller wings on the back and smaller wings on the front, and then you take away the downforce from underneath the car, then you take the end plates away from the front wing, over and over and over and over again, and you won't end up with the same place. Whether it's Prost or whether it's Vettel, whether it's Senna, whether it's Mansell, all of these guys in their time in the car have always complained about the turbulence from the car ahead. At some point, you've just got to put your hand up and say, it's Formula One racing. You kind of got to get on with it. That's what it is, you know. We've had cars with ground effects, and we've still complained about the handling of cars. David, you can speak to this, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, it certainly would appear, though, that to have a tunnel, some sort of a tunnel under a car, definitely seems to affect the following car less. Whether, as you say, you know, we've tried it, we've been down this road, and then we've tried all the other ways. But I think the way the wings are going at the moment, that anything's probably better than what we've got at the moment. So it's worth giving it a shot.
Go for it, Jamie. Let's get some more donations.
Sure. Yeah, we have $100 from Kyle that I think I want to combine with the question that we put that we mentioned in our invitation to this webinar. Kyle says, you guys are awesome for donating your time to Morgan Adams. Thank you. Any up and coming drivers we should look at? And I want to combine that with Michelle, who says, Will, given Lewis Hamilton has been the dominant car for the past 7 years, and the only competition came from his teammate Nico Rosberg, do you think that hurts his reputation as the greatest of all time against Schumacher? And so combine all of that with who is the GOAT? Is it Lewis? Is it Michael? Is it Senna? Is it Jimmy Clark? Or is it somebody else?
Shall I start then with the Lewis question?
Sure.
I mean, obviously, his rookie season, he was pitched against Fernando as a two-time world champion, and they finished that season level on points. He was teammate with Jenson Button, another world champion. And, you know, like Michael went to a team that wasn't performing brilliantly, Lewis with Mercedes, Michael with Ferrari, and Lewis's, you know, effort to create that team ethic, that team environment has turned them into this all-dominant, all-beating force. But I think it's Lewis's introspection, the way that he's able to lift himself to another level, even if he doesn't have competition on track, that marks him out as being someone truly special. I think it's difficult to really find a comparison between generations, between Lewis and Michael, between, you know, Lewis and Fangio or whoever, because the cars, the experiences at the time are all so different. Is Lewis the best of his generation? Undoubtedly. As for who's looking good for the future, I'm a huge fan of a young girl called Juju Noda, who's 14 years old. She's the daughter of Hideki Noda, who used to be a Formula One driver. I think she's really special and could be a girl that absolutely blows the doors off this whole, you know, there aren't any women in Formula One. And I think Juju could be amazing if her trajectory follows the path that I think it might. In terms of the greatest of all time, for me, only two names in motor racing have ever deserved that title. One is the sadly recently departed Sir Stirling Moss, and the other is the incredibly awesome Mario Andretti.
Good choice. Very good choice. I think this greatest of all time is so hard to quantify, because I was doing this with an email with a friend of mine yesterday about Lewis and Schumacher and Lewis and Jimmy Clark. And my big question is, would Lewis be as brave and as ballsy as he is? I mean, when it comes to overtaking, ever since his GP2 days, there's nobody who's been able to overtake like Lewis. He is just extraordinary. His judgment and he makes so few mistakes. He really has had an incredibly mistake-free career. And the thing is that he races short races, hour and 30 minutes, very high tech. Completely reboots the computer on the steering wheel going through the streets of Singapore. Fangio and Jimmy drove 3-hour races, no fences, go to Spa, barbed wire fence everywhere, buildings to hit, walls to hit, trees everywhere. Would Lewis have driven the same in that condition as he does now? So, and there's no way of knowing. Drivers keep on asking for more runoff area. Back in those days, there was no runoff area at all, let alone let's get a bit more runoff area. So I think to compare drivers is very difficult on that score. Obviously, the technicalities of the car are so totally different as well. And what might have suited one guy doesn't suit the other. But I think that as Sterling Moss, of course, is right at the top of my list, along with Jimmy and Mario. Mario is so diverse. He's driving on the dirt in DuQuoin with a front-engine offset car one week, and the next week he's winning at Spa with a ground effect Lotus Formula One car. That is an incredible ability to adapt to different formula, which the modern guys don't have to do. You either do Formula One, or you do IndyCar, or you do sports car. You don't do everything like they do. So it's an argument that could go on forever and ever and ever, Jamie.
Yeah, sure. How about you guys, Steve and Leigh?
Well, I work with Michael, as you guys know. So my choice for greatest of all time, purely because I worked with him and I saw him at work behind the wheel and I heard him on the radio and dealt with him in the garage. It's got to be Michael. An absolutely singular talent. There's just seems to be just leagues ahead of everybody. And by coincidence, certainly we're coming up to the anniversary of that incredible Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona, where Michael's car was stuck in 5th gear and managed to bring the car back and take 2nd place on the podium with the car stuck in one gear. And listening, and I can remember this today, it was like hair standing up on the back of your neck, listening to Michael and Ross on the radio discussing with each other how to make the car work, Michael brought the car in for 2 pit stops in 5th gear, and we changed fuel and tires and got him back out in 5th gear. It's incredible. She's like, how is it possible? Not only to just finish the race, down in 26, but he finished on the podium directly behind the Williams of Damon. So that drive alone, for me, puts him in an entirely different category. Yeah. But again, I am biased. I make no bones about that because I know him, I work with him, and I owe him a great deal. Quite frankly, we wouldn't be having this conversation today if Michael Schumacher hadn't been working with Benetton during my time.
I think and Steve went down this road a little bit because of his personal experience. I'd like to say that somebody is the most successful because of these amount of wins or these amount of championships, etc. I think the greatest, that's your choice, because we all look for something in a driver or an athlete, and that's our opinion, that's our choice. And I think we all gravitate towards certain drivers for a certain reason. And then I think you have to draw a line and differentiate. This is what they did statistically. This is how they won, how many championships they won. But for me, like you say, for me, this is who I like. So it is a bit of a slippery slope. So like Will, and because we all 4 of us are very good friends with Mario Andretti, I think Mario's just incredible. And Will and I have had the privilege to do a 2-seater IndyCar ride with him around the Indianapolis Speedway, and that was a life-changing experience.
Very fun. Very fun. Okay, well, so that settles it for all time, I guess. Everybody's been wanting to know. So in the interest of time, we don't want to keep you guys any longer than we do want to keep you longer, but we want to be honoring of your time. And so we want to thank you for coming and doing this today. Leigh, Dave, Steve, and Will, gosh, we really appreciate it. We love the stories, so much fun. I have Joan here who is going to sign us off here.
I want to put my vote in. You can't see it. Oh, I have my Michael Schumacher t-shirt I was going to wear. So there you go.
There you go.
I love Schumi. So there you go. I also wanted to extend my thanks to you guys so very, very much for doing this for Morgan Adams Foundation and for the Race Against Kids Cancer. Our relationship with the vintage motorsport community has been unparalleled, and the efforts of motorsports to help eradicate pediatric cancer has just been an enormous part of my life. So thank you very much for spending time with us and with our community. It means just a tremendous amount. So this is a group that is really working to turn hope into action, and they're doing it very, very well. So for our racing community, please, if you are coming out to the Race Against Kids Cancer, please take the time to set up your fundraising page. We would love to see you all at High Plains. Come out, get registered, come and race with us. If you're a spectator, we'll be out there the first weekend in August. We would love to have you join us. Please don't forget to make a donation to the foundation. It's my job, and it is vitally important to all of the kids and teenagers that are battling cancer that we rely on you to help us fund their treatment. So thank you very much for your participation. I want to apologize again for the technical difficulties we had at the beginning of this. Please spread the word that we will publish. The video will come out in a link for the attendees, but we'll also be having it up on the Race Against Kids Cancer website. So we will share that with everyone so everybody can have the benefit of watching the entire show from beginning to end. So thank you guys so much. It was delightful to see you all again, and I really appreciate it. And Will, to see you. Thanks for joining and staying up late to be with us. We really, really appreciate you guys very, very much. So lovely to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe and Jamie. Thanks for having us on board, and I hope we raised some money.
Yeah, I think we did. So.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was a great pleasure.
Yeah.
Wonderful to be part of it, and thank you very much for asking us on. Can't believe that was an hour. It just absolutely flashed by.
Well, we'll stick around as long as you guys want. So, but thank you very much. So nice to see you guys.
And thank you, and good luck with your future endeavours with the Morgan Adams Foundation. And for us, we really miss being together, but we have never ever forgotten and won't ever forget how generous the American motor racing and F1 fan base was with us, and we miss kind of having that platform of being able to talk together as a group to the F1 fan base in the US. So thanks for giving us that this afternoon, and yeah, let's keep that let's keep the fight and the race against kids cancer going.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, we'll do it again. If you're up for doing it again, we'll let everybody know. So I'll talk to you about it.
For sure.
100%. Absolutely. Would love to.
Anytime, but next time we'll do it a bit later so that Will has to start at like midnight.
That sounds good to me. Okay, you guys. Thanks. Thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.